to another episode of the Cultivate and Keep podcast. I'm Corey.
And I'm Jeremy, and I think one day I will do the intro.
One day. You know what? I should have just let...
taking the
I just roll with it, dude. I just take the initiative.
You do have the better podcast voice, so...
I don't know. We both sound pretty crispy.
I mean, I don't know. You sound better for sure.
Okay. I'll just take it.
I have a big heart, like I've said before. So.
That's true. Big heart makes up for everything.
It's true.
No matter what. Cool. Well, we have an episode we're going to do a book review on Wild at Heart. And so we're just going to share our notes and sort of the things that we learned, things we took away from it. I think this will be valuable for you whether or not you've read the book. If you haven't read the book, this will probably encourage you to read the book, which you absolutely should. What are you saying? Jeremy's giving me random gang symbols at me.
I'm giving him like signs. That's funny. I'll do point number 2. You do 1. Okay.
Okay.
We didn't really plan ahead who's doing what. We just
yeah. We just roll with it. Okay. Wait. So I'm 1, you're 2.
Yeah. Because yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. I like
and then 3. I don't know. Up for grabs. We'll see.
All right. Maybe we'll just see who takes the initiative.
That's funny.
Cool. Okay. So if you don't know, Wild at Heart is from written by John Eldredge. A little backstory on how I was introduced to it. I heard of it. I think my parents even had a copy in our house. I'd always seen it. I tried to read it in high school. Never got around to it. Just sort of wasn't that into it. I think I read like the first couple pages and just kind of like, meh, not that cool.
Meh.
And then I was advised by my uncle to read it before I got married. So I just got married in February of 2018. And so it was like December, and he was like, oh, you should definitely read this book. He had just went to like, I think they have like, he hosts like a conference even, which we should look into that. But he went to this conference out in Colorado, and he had read the book again, for the second time. And he's like, you have to read this book before you get married. I didn't end up reading the book before we got married. But I think in this whole, this sort of like identity crisis where I was, I just gotten married, the Lord is really kind of pressing on my heart of like, what does it mean to be a man, and sort of identity and finding your calling and everything, where I was like, oh yeah, I should pick up Wild at Heart again. So I picked it up, and then I read through it in like a week or something, and I just plowed through it. And then I was like, Jeremy, you have to read this book. And then he read it, and he wasn't that impressed at first, but then he was later, right?
Yeah, for me, it was the first, like, probably 100 pages. The first 2 or 3 chapters I had a hard time, like, getting into. Yeah. But same as you, I was advised by so many people to read it, and, like, everyone said, like, dude, you have to read this book. It's so good, like, blah, blah, blah. And so I think I read it in, like, 2 weeks, a week and a half. Yeah. But the first, like, day or 2, I read the first probably 100 pages, and it was like, and then, like, hit a certain chapter and boom, like was so good. Like, yeah,
you hit certain parts, and I think that's the cool part about the book is that there are certain sections that will speak to you much more than others. Like for me, I think we both had like a there's different parts that speak to different people just based on your own experience and what you're looking to get out of it, and what the Lord speaks through it to you. So anyways, I'll kind of kick us off with just kind of talking about the beginning of the book, and sort of the whole premise of the book is that John Eldredge talks about the nature of man, and he goes all the way back to the beginning of describing, God making man and woman, but specifically man, who God first made, and then, woman was made from man. So he talks about the nature of man and the sort of first desires that God gives in their heart, how God designed man and the way that man was supposed to be and to act and to live. And so it's sort of split into these 3 sections. The first is kind of introducing the nature of man and kind of the biblical roots of man. And then the second, he talks about all the struggles of manhood and sort of the idea of like the imposter syndrome and being a poser and all the wounds that a man kind of gets, in his life. And then the third section is getting back to the roots of what it means to be a man, in a very godly perspective. But that first part, he establishes the fact that every aspect of a man, from his desires to who he is, reflects God. Going back to, when it says, God made man in his image, he didn't mean in the physical sense. He meant in a spiritual sense, in the characteristics, in his nature, in the way that he is and thinks and loves and just everything that he does. So he bases all this belief on Genesis 1:26-28, where God creates mankind from his image as male and female, and then he talks about the different nuances of man between male and female. And then he talks about he just kind of establishes that the reason a man has the desires that he does, and the reason why he is masculine, is because he is ultimately an image bearer of God. And so I think that was one of the main things that struck out to me, was like, it's not just that men and women are different in their personalities or in their physical traits, but it's literally in the way that we reflect God is different. Like, we're not just, I don't know, different sets of Legos that are just kind of arbitrarily different, but we are different by design in the way that we reflect God, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, men reflect God uniquely in this way. They demonstrate God's ability to come through for his people in the same way men are made to come through. And so, he kind of talks about like the every man's desire. I think the famous line is, every man wants a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue. I'm getting them out of order.
One, yeah.
I skipped one. Let me look down to the quotes. I think it's I don't think I put it in there because I thought maybe I would know it.
I saw it. Hold on.
It was somewhere. Every hold on. Oh, I think it's an adventure to live, a beauty to rescue, and a battle to fight. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he kind of sets that up in this premise, and then go ahead. You can talk about the second part.
Yeah.
Of it.
So the point 2, he talks about men acting as posers, and talks mainly that comes from past hurt in our life that needs healing. And this was the part that I love, that really spoke to me.
Yeah.
And one thing he talks about, men that live and act as posers, that typically translates into two different forms of a man. Either a man that's angry, or B, a man that's passive. And when I read that, I was thinking about it, and this was the part of the book that really spoke to me, like I said, and that kind of made me get excited about it. And I felt like this was obvious. Yes, we know that. That I think in general, men tend to be angry or passive. That's a normal thing. But the way he sets it up and talks about it, just, I don't know. It was so clear. And
yeah, and if I can interject, I think you're right. It seems obvious, but it's not in the sense that that it's a biblical fact. So for me, I didn't recognize. I'm definitely not I wasn't the angry man. I was definitely the passive man.
Same part for me. Yeah.
And we just recorded an episode where we talked about our testimonies, and I was talking about how sort of the struggle that I had was a lot of sort of I don't know, you can call it self-esteem or confidence or identity, and I was always really shy, and I think it was part of just that being passive, and so recognizing that oh, this is a normal thing. I don't know. It was kind of revelational for me. So go ahead.
Yeah, and so he talks about how this shows itself by men being either angry or passive, and he says that this is rooted in deep hurts in our life, and it comes from just whether we were younger or recently in our lives. Every man is carrying around some form of a hurt. That's kind of his whole premise, and he talks about. Basically that our world is made up of a lot of big what does he say, big kids, kind of what he says.
Big boys.
Yeah, big boys. Yeah. We're grown up. He said he said you have little, what do you say, you have big boys that drive tractors and that work in offices, whatever he says, right? And so his idea is that we're all really boys and doing man stuff, and we're not really fully men. We have not fully come alive. We're not doing what we were fully made to do. And that was the part that really stuck to me. And he says, the answer to the hurt, the answer to these questions we all have, is obviously found in Jesus. And the book, he walks you through a process and the journey of finding healing and restoration that only God can give us. And this was kind of the meat of the book. But I love that part.
Yeah. Why don't we just jump into kind of that section, and I think that, like you said, that's the part that stood out to you the most.
Yeah.
Do you want to just elaborate on what stood out to you and how it relates back to your life?
Yeah, I'll kind of start on my points that I wanted to share. So one of the quotes that I wrote down says, "Every man carries a wound. I have never met a man without one. No matter how good your life may have seemed to you, you live in a broken world full of broken people." And I mean, I think that is so true. And again, like I said, I think it's an obvious like statement. But the way he sets it up is just so like it was compelling to me. And not only that, but I could relate, and it helped me to understand like, like this is me. Like this is not just people that I know. Like I am hurt. I am broken. I do have just hurt in my life that I have carried, and it needs to be dealt with. And so, this was kind of the first chapter that really caught my attention. And so there's a part where he talks about 4 steps to healing, like a hurt and like damaged heart. And this was the chapter that had me sitting on my couch. I think I shared it in a previous episode. Sitting on my couch, just bawling like a little boy, like reading this. And so, he really helps you to kind of unveil and recognize like where in your heart are you hurt and where did that stem from. And so for me, as I was reading that chapter, I was just thinking through my life, thinking through, just hurt that I have. And I shared in our testimony episode about, in 6th grade, living like with fear and anxiety, having a big stronghold on my life. And a big reason why that came in was because in 5th grade, there were some things that my dad had done, nothing like crazy. And I have a great dad. I don't think he was intentional, but a few things he had said to me and had done put me in certain positions that I think welcomed in like a spirit of fear in my life.
Yeah.
And it was, as I read that chapter, I kind of realized, oh wow, like I also shared like that recently fear has been, and anxiety has kind of crept back in my life. It's come in waves the last couple of years, and I've realized it's because of this stronghold that was set in place when I was in fifth and 6th grade from my dad. And so it was a cool moment of like, wow, like this, I have a part to demolish this stronghold, and I can do things to overcome this, and it's not just who I am. And so identifying the hurt, knowing where it stems from, was huge for me. And so I did that by following the 4 steps that he has in his book. And so the 4 steps, the first one is surrender. The second one is grieve. And point 2 was the one that had me just wrecked. I was crying. Point 3 was let God love you. And number 4 was forgive. And so I've read books in the past that have steps like this, where it's like, do these 4 steps to find freedom or to whatever. And I always find them cheesy, and I never like think it's helpful.
Well, there's a lot of like self-help books that are like that are not biblical.
But I mean, just in general, or
but I think that we have a distaste for it because there's that relation where most people think like, you kind of have like the Tony Robbins of the world, where it's just like, just yell and like literally yell it away, and you're like, okay, like that was cool, but this doesn't really help. It's not on a spiritual level. So maybe there was some of that like association where it's like, do I really need to grieve? Like, do I really need to let it out?
So what I, and again, like for me, this stuff was back when I was in 5th grade, but I think why it was so real this time was I connected the two. I realized, okay, a big reason why I'm feeling anxiety and fear and just hesitation in my life today as a 23-year-old man is because hurt that I let in from a little boy that I've never really dealt with, because I've always just kind of thought, oh, it wasn't a big deal. Like my dad didn't mean to hurt me. That's all I've thought. And even though I thought that, there still was hurt. And maybe it wasn't intentional, but I still had something in my heart. And another thing was I kind of played it off like, oh, it was not a big deal. Like I had a great childhood. Many people have it harder than me, which is true. But doesn't matter. I also learned like doesn't matter the like extent of what it was. Like it's my life and there's hurt. And I think every person has their life and they have their own hurt. No matter how big or small it may sound, like we all have our own stories and our own situations that we have to work through. And so for me, it could be considered like a small deal, but it still affected me. And so when I connected the two, I followed the steps. And so I simply like surrendered it to God and just really worked through it in my heart and kind of realized, okay, like Lord, like, this happened to me and I let go of it and I released it to you. And I was able to have a few minutes of just like feeling the pain, I think, and just grieving and like letting those thoughts in. And then like I just genuinely like tried to allow God to love me and to speak to me. And then in my heart, I forgave my dad. And simple as that, and again sounds like cheesy, but I did it, and it was like, boom, like really, really, really good.
Yeah.
I have more points I want to share that I liked from the book, but if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the wounds part was definitely a revelation for me as well, because I mean a similar thing. I think it's not a coincidence that we both found the same part to be compelling, and we both have things to share on it. I think that probably most men do, and you know, I think we're lucky that our fathers weren't abusive. They were both Christians. They were both good fathers in a lot of ways, right? But even the fact that there still are some wounds and that still does affect us into our life is a huge tell, because think about all the men out there who didn't have a father, or whose father left them when they were 12, or whose father was abusive, or whose father was an alcoholic. Like, that leaves some really big open wounds. You know what I mean? And so I'm just pointing that out because while I'm not downplaying our own, it's like, wow, like this is a real thing. So like, pay attention. You know what I mean?
And again, it's another reason why we wanted to start Cultivate and Keep. Is
yeah,
just,
exactly.
Understanding, you know, and we've said this before, but we both, you know, come from, you know, good families, and if we still have work to do and still have things like that are broken in us, what about those that don't come from the family that we come from? You know, it's got to be the same, if not more intense. And so,
yeah. So that part really stood out to me. I was reading it as well. And as I was reading, the Lord was revealing to me some things that I hadn't dealt with, and some things that I had dealt with, but he was just revealing to me that, you know, he, like, kind of just connecting the dots for me. And so I'll just share a couple of mine, because again, they're not like the worst things in the world. And I just want to say, like, I love my dad. I've forgiven him from all those things. He wasn't bad. So Dad, if you're listening, you know,
same. Dad, I love you so much.
Yeah, love you. Not a big deal. Like, God is good. And
we're fine.
Yeah, we're fine. We're men. We can deal with it. No, but he was revealing to me some things I hadn't thought about for a long time. Like, for example, I mean, and it sounds silly, but I was all my no, not that. All of my life, my siblings on my dad's side were really good at sports. So all my life, I've sort of felt like I really need to be into sports, and I really need to get really good at sports. And I never actually got into sports until I was in 7th grade, when I played football for the first time, and I hated it. I was absolutely trash. I was the worst. But
I can see that.
Yeah, but I always wanted to play sports with my dad, and I always wanted to play football with my dad, because we both liked football, and he was a high school football star. But for some reason, it was either like his elbow or because of time, but we never played together, and then I really stunk. And I always remember like feeling hurt about that. Like, you know, everyone else's dad plays with their son. They play football, they play catch or baseball, or, you know, they take them to their games, they play together or train together. So I remember and this is even dumber, but I bought Madden NFL, the video game, for the specific reason that my dad and I could play video games together, and we could virtually play sports together. And I remember I was sitting there, I was like, "Oh, Dad, like that game looks sick, huh?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, that looks cool." And I was like, "Oh, awesome, I'm gonna buy it, and like we're gonna play together." And then I bought it, and then he was like, "Oh no, I don't want to play video games." And I was just so crushed, like, "You're kidding me!" Like, oh my gosh, what the heck? You know, and then some other things like, and I'm realizing a lot of these have to do with sports, which I'm not really sure why, but neither of my parents really went to a lot of my sports games. Like when I played basketball, my dad came to a couple. When I played football, he went to a lot until he had like a sciatica nerve pinch, and he was like in bed for like months, and he missed like the rest of my season. But he didn't come to any of my volleyball games, and you know that just kind of hurts a little bit, because you see other kids' dads in the stands, and they all know each other, and they're talking, and like you want your dad to see you like when you do good, or when you spike the ball, or when you make a shot. You know, another thing was we didn't go on many like vacations or trips together, which kind of stunk too. And again, a lot of this was also in comparison to other families, and I realized I didn't have a bad life or a hard life. But again, that was just what the Lord was revealing to me of what those wounds were. And a part of that, like you said, men either become angry or pacified. So I think I became very pacified from those things, but also a myriad of other things. You know, but he has this quote. He says, for after years of living in a cage, a lion no longer even believes it is a lion, and a man no longer believes he is a man. So you have this identity crisis where you forget, what it's like to live or to be free or to not have those wounds or insecurities. And I relate to that because I felt like I was just kind of like subdued. Like I felt like I wanted to be someone else. I couldn't be who I wanted. I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. And so it made me pacified in a lot of ways. But I think my next points are relating to women. So I'll let you jump back to your part. Yeah. That's funny.
So I have one more before that I'll share. So
yeah.
So the whole book was full, I think, of random just gems. Like once I got into it, I was like, wow, there's a lot of good stuff in this. But one thing he talked about was, as men, kind of how we, grown up as boys, how we were always told no. And if he's like, he had a point. He said, if you observe parents with little kids, just watch how much they tell their kids, no, like, don't do that, don't touch that, sit down, whatever it is, right? Specifically with boys, like, pay attention to how reckless boys can be and how much parents try to keep the boys from being reckless. And he talks about that and kind of talks about it's good for a boy to be reckless, like, and not in a stupid way, but he's kind of saying it's good for a boy to, touch that thing and get his finger pinched, or to run and follow, whatever he says. Like, it's good for a boy to
jump
explore,
off the slide,
have adventure, and to
scrape
learn.
Your knee.
And I was thinking about that, like, man, like, I'm not a dad, I don't have a kid, but like it's so true. And then I was thinking about the high school small group that I lead, and how often are we telling the boys like no? And these kids are freshmen in high school, but how often are we telling them no or what they can and can't do? And it just kind of got me thinking, like, it is good for boys to learn by trial and error, like not in a bad way. I get what I'm saying, but
there are boundaries.
Yeah, in context, and then to some extent what they can do. But that really like stuck out to me. I thought that was like really good. I want to share.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a strong correlation there. Like, if your parents said no a lot or didn't let you do the things, you were probably more rebellious later on in life or even in general, just because it kind of like conditions you. It trains you to think like rebel, or like my parents don't want the best for me, or my parents don't let me do anything. And that creates a wound, like my parents don't love me, or my parents don't want me to have fun, or my parents won't let me do anything. So yeah, anyways, you want to jump to women? This is the good stuff. This is the meat of the episode.
Yeah, so what he had to say about women, again, I feel like a lot of what he said was obvious, like stuff that we know, but again, the way he says it was just so good, and it helped me to really understand it and help it to click. So he kind of talks about like 3 things that like a woman wants, and like 3 things that women like need. And so the first was he said women yearned to be fought for. And I remember in that part he talks about they don't like want to be fought for, they yearn to be fought for. Like, it's a deep desire in their heart that they want someone to fight for them, and it's like more than them wanting to be like noticed and like liked, like they want to be wanted, like deeply wanted. And so I thought of, like, I've heard that before, but like I was thinking in context of with Connie, my fiance, and thinking of, okay, like, in what ways does Connie want to be like noticed or deeply wanted or fought for? And I was just thinking, like, wow, like some of our like biggest arguments and like disagreements come from the times when I don't like choose her, or when I don't fight for her, when I don't like be on her team. That's like a common like
when you don't stand up for her.
And I don't. It's not that I don't want to. I just at times don't even like think about it. Right. I'm just like living, and it could be very like small, simple ways that I don't like fight for her, that it's important to her. And so like hearing him and like reading that, I was like, wow, like this is so true. So that was his first point. Women want to be.
Can I just jump in really quick?
Please do.
Okay, this is a super silly example, but I feel like it illustrates it so well. Do you remember the Office episode? I'm going to make so many Office references in this podcast, but the Office episode where Andy and Dwight like agree to duel over Angela, and then Oscar's like, oh, she like slightly she's like mentions somehow that it's not the first one, not the first like duel that people have done over, and then Oscar's like, Angela, what is wrong with you? But I just thought it was so funny. Like, it really is like a natural inborn desire for women that they want to be fought for. Like it's how God designed women and men to interact.
For a second, I thought you were gonna reference Meredith's comment about the camera.
Meredith. I don't remember it,
but I probably should.
It's probably inappropriate. Yeah. We should probably save it.
Meredith,
okay.
So.
Okay.
Anyway,
point made. Anyways.
So that was number 1. Point 2. Every woman wants an adventure to share.
Yeah.
And I don't have to really explain that. That's just kind of like obvious. But again, that was so true. And then thirdly, every woman wants to have beauty that they can unveil to a man or the man they choose to be with. And I thought that was so true. He also made another point that was a different chapter, but he said, women do not want a man who's hesitant. And this also spoke to me because I think that I can be hesitant at times, and especially when I fall back into like a season of being fearful or anxious, I become very like slow to make decisions. I become very hesitant, and like when he said that again, I thought of Contact with Connie and thought of like, okay, she does not like it when I'm hesitant, and but it spoke to me like women deserve and need men that are gonna be confident in what they do and lead them, and so that those things really spoke to me. That was good.
Yeah, he has this other quote where he says, I don't know what the reference is, but he says, as Robert Bly laments in Iron John, I don't know what that is. Someone tell me if you do know. But he says, the quote is from, some women want a passive man if they want a man at all. The church wants a tamed man. They are called priests. The university wants a domesticated man. They are called tenure-track people. The corporation wants a sanitized, hairless, shallow man. And I thought that was so true, when we're talking about, especially in the context of women don't want a domesticated, tame, nice guy. You know what I mean? Like that I think that's why so many women fall for or want, the bad boy, quote unquote. The guy who wears the leather jacket and rides the motorbike. And
the motorbike.
Oh God, I just aged. Oh, I just sound like a dork.
Yeah.
What's that? A street bike or what's a Harley called?
Motorcycle.
Motorbike. What's wrong with me? Anyways,
so funny.
That's why women want the bad boy, because they want someone who is wild. They want someone who's adventurous. They want someone who's going to fight for them. They want someone who knows what they want. They want someone who's not hesitant. But that's like the opposite extreme of like all the bad manifestations of those characteristics and those qualities. But we, as Christian men and men in general, have lost the good qualities of that too.
Yeah.
We've lost the good qualities of being adventurous, of fighting and standing up for women or other people, the good qualities of knowing what you want and going after it and being ambitious. But I think for women in general, those 3 points, a woman yearns to be fought for, like A+, absolutely true. And I think that's, I think that even speaks to why women will choose men who aren't good for them necessarily, because at least that man is fighting for them. At least that man shows that they want them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they want someone to adventure with. Like I think that's also sort of the stereotypical housewife who's bored with their husband and goes out and cheats with the whoever it is, because men need adventure in their life, and they need adventure to share with a woman, and women want men who are going to have an adventure to share with.
Yeah.
And also the beauty to unveil. I think that's also a really cool point, because I think that this also gives a lot of context indirectly to why it's so incredibly important to save yourself for marriage sexually, to both be virgins, but especially just for each other in your relationship to not have any sexual history with each other, because it's a beauty to unveil when you're married. You know what I mean? And it's yourself that you save for that person, and now you're unveiling that to them, and then they get to feel like, I am for you. Here is all of me and all of my beauty for you, 100%.
I agree. I think that's like what we most commonly like think of when we think of like that. Also, I think like emotionally and like saving yourself emotionally, I think is important too. It sounds kind of weird to say, but like thinking like with the women, like they want to be fully known. So for Connie, it's really important to be fully known, that I know her and I know what she wants. I know that the things she likes and just her natural tendencies, and it's important that I just like know all of Connie, and so she wants to give that to me, wants to unveil me. She wants all that she is to be mine physically.
Yeah.
Amen. Hallelujah. And emotionally, she wants that to be mine. And so I think that's super important of, where you're at now of, be careful the things you share and how deep you go, on the emotional side, not just physically, but, with people that you're dating now. Like how well do they know you? How deep do they know you?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I had another point I wanted to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this wasn't in either of our notes, but I was thinking of it as we were talking. Was he also talks a lot in the book about like being alone and getting out in nature, and I think that's is important for men just to like, especially being alone and having things quiet. I think to think and to process stuff, and if you can be in nature, I think that's a good point that we have so much noise and so much going on that we neglect that part of life. And I think he talks about in the Bible like how when God speaks to people in the Bible, they're always
it's
alone,
always in the wilderness,
and it's often like after long periods of time.
Yeah.
And the most common one that I think of is like Moses when he went up the mountain and spent 40 days, fasting and seeking.
Was it 40 days?
It was 40 days fasting and seeking the Lord, and 40 days on a mountain, like
that's intense. Yeah, that's like, for real.
I'm trying to think like. When's the longest that I went like without my phone?
3 days,
if that. Yeah, and so it's like that was so common that I think we forget about that. And so in the book, he draws us back to that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because I was thinking about it as I was reading, but I forgot it, and so I'm glad you brought that up. But I mean, I have that desire. Like, I love being out in nature in the wilderness, like going to the mountains, going to the beach, like just being out in nature. But also, so I was thinking about my cousin Michael, and I remember this conversation that we had a couple years ago where it was like he was obsessed with like just being out in the cabin and just like doing his own thing and like just finding himself. And I was like, why are you so obsessed with like you can do that here in your room? But actually, like maybe you can't, you know what I mean? Like actually I think that there is something special about going out in the world. Like you think about Jesus, there were certain times where he would go away up in the mountain, often in the middle of the night. He would just pray in the middle of nowhere for hours on end. And that's what he would do. That's where he would go to be with God. In the same way, like you said, Moses, I think Ezekiel is one of the, also like a really good example of that. But I just think that's so cool. Like that's sort of like I don't know, like a bonus from God. Like, hey, you can meet me out in the wilderness. Like, how cool is that?
So I've been thinking like, I'm probably like out in the wilderness maybe 3 times a year. Like
I know
it's not a lot, and so I've been thinking like, how can I practice this? And so for my devotional time, for me, like I love like doing devotions on my patio and doing it. Like if I have a view to look at, I don't live in a place with a view, but just anywhere like trees or like the sunset, whatever it is, like the sunrise. I need some kind of like open air like to look at, and so I've been practicing. My devotional time actually being a lot of just like sitting and thinking. Like, it's like a lot of what I do now, and it's my devotional time. I'm not reading. I'm not really like even praying. Just simply like thinking and being quiet and being still. It's like so good for me. Just like I love it, and I'll easily spend 15, 20, 30 minutes just sitting there, like observing, like feeling the wind, and just it sounds weird, but it the Lord speaks to me, and I feel like a closeness with Him when I do that.
Yeah. And I think, so kind of transitioning to the next point I wanted to make, but I think that there's a wildness that we ignore. And it sounds super like corny talking about like wildness or like wilderness or like being adventurous, because those are all kind of lame, overused words. But I think there is some truth there about maybe we're a little too domesticated. Maybe we're a little too tamed. Like I think about myself, I'm not a wild person. I'm actually like pretty chill and like pretty conservative. I'm not like the most excitable person. Like even at my most excited, I'm still like,
I like my chill.
Yeah. It's like you're chill. You know what I mean? But like I want to be adventurous. I want to go do things. I want to go travel. I want to go take risks. Like it's literally a part of me that I can't ignore. And it's something that you think about, like, just all the different ways that that the world or that Satan is trying to tame you and domesticate you. It doesn't necessarily have to. I think that the point I'm trying to make is not necessarily just about nature. It's also in other areas of life. So thinking about like starting a new job, you know, the devil's always trying to domesticate you. Like, no, just stay where you are right now. It's safer there. Or just, you know, don't go change careers because that's stupid, or because you're going to look like a fool, or, you know, don't start your own business, even though you really want to, because that's dumb and you need to play it safe. You need to retire when you're 65. You know what I mean? Don't study to train to become X, Y, or Z. Don't get married young and travel. Those are all adventurous things, and they're good things. And I think if we let culture and society's influence us too much, we can err to be on the too domesticated, the too tamed side of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know exactly how to best elaborate the idea of adventure, especially not like he does. Maybe you just have to read the book and you'll grasp it more. But the whole theme of adventure really stuck with me. And I'm not exactly sure how to like elaborate on it. You know what I mean? Like, I know that it's important, and I know that it's a part of who you are as a man and how God designed you to be. But it just manifests. Maybe it just manifests in so many different ways that I'm not exactly sure how to pinpoint it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a great point of the book.
Yeah.
Like, adventure is there, and it's a part of your nature and life as a man.
That's funny. So for me, that was good. I didn't feel like adventure really like sat with me. I think the part that rested in me the most was probably when he talks about, because he does talk about like, yes, being like a untamed, like strong man, but he also talks about like the soft side of like a man that loves well and that loves hard.
Right.
That to me spoke the most, I think. Okay. Being a man that loves well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, it's kind of that like dichotomy, the two things working together. You have like the adventure, kind of wild, the man who fights for the woman, the man who stands there for what's right, the man who's, you know, adventurous and risky. But then it's also like the tender-hearted, and again, that's what women want too. They want the man who can listen to them and who can understand them and who can read their minds sometimes. And
good luck.
Yeah, maybe that part isn't meant to be a part of man's nature. But yeah, that's a good point that they're both there. They need to both be there. Oh yeah. I mean, sort of on that point, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but he also has this quote where he says, emasculation, and emasculation being like the diminishing of your masculinity, emasculation happens in marriage as well. Women are often attracted to a wilder side of a man, but once having caught him, they settle down to the task of domesticating him. Ironically, if he gives in, he'll resent her for it, and she in turn will wonder where the passion has gone. But I just thought that was interesting because you think of the stereotypical kind of life in the suburbs, settling down kind of cliches. And I don't know, it just sort of, it was interesting to me that emasculation, right? If a woman is trying to domesticate a man too much, and like, it was sort of along the same lines of like, if your father is telling you no too much, or your parents are just not letting you scrape your knee or go adventure, you end up resenting them. But it was the same thing with a woman in a relationship. You have to have a healthy balance of adventure. I'm going to go out and be with my friends. I'm going to go out and go on this trip. I'm going to go and explore this new business idea. And you also have to balance that with, hey, I'm going to be here for you. You know, I'm always going to be here. I want to provide for you and be here emotionally for you. We're going to be able to live in a house and have a steady, you know, life for our kids.
Yeah. You know, one thing he talks about in the book is being fully alive. And the second half of one of the quotes he has says, all men die, but few men ever really live.
Man, that one hit me really hard.
Me too. I was like, whew,
that one's heavy.
Fire.
John Eldredge spitting fire. Yeah, so maybe to finish up here, you know, he talks about, so we talked about the nature of man, how men naturally reflect God, and then the second part where it's kind of about the wound and the healing. But the third part is kind of getting back to the core desires of a man's heart. And so, again, he talks about those three core ideas of the battle, the adventure, and the beauty. And so it's just these three ideas of every man wants a battle to fight. So that it's either like a cause, or it's a woman, or it's something that they're passionate about, you know, some sort of movement or thing that they're trying to push forward. Every man kind of needs something to get behind and to push forward.
And he talks about like most men don't have that.
Yeah. And it's a loss for them. It's a bad thing for them. And then the second desire being an adventure to live. Just having sort of an appreciation for nature and exploration and conquering things and going and exploring. And he talks back to those people like Abraham and Jacob and Moses and David, and when God called them in the wilderness. And then that third desire for the beauty to rescue. And in no way is he an advocate for sort of that like male superiority complex, misogynist kind of male where they're putting women down. But he also talks about the healthy wildness of a man in relation to a woman, where he's fighting for the woman, and he's meeting her needs emotionally also. But it's also just the idea of like, don't become too domesticated. Don't, like, you can still be with a woman and rescue the beauty and have adventure in your life, and to enjoy it and to not miss out on it. And so, yeah, anyways, it's really good. You should go read the book if you haven't already. I think we'll manage to put a link to it in the show notes or somewhere in the podcast. If you look for it hard enough, I'm sure you'll find it. But read it. It's John Eldridge's book, Wild at Heart. Jared, you want to close this out?
Yeah, I'll pray. Let's close.
Cool.
That's not a joke, but I'm not going to pray.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you like this podcast, give us a rating, preferably 5 stars. Actually,
6 stars.
Only 6 stars, yes.
Only 6 stars. Like our boys at Drift. Shout out to Uncle DG and Uncle DC.
Corey's being a fanboy right now.
Yeah, I met you guys. You guys were cool.
All right. So, yeah, give us a rating, and then if you like us, please subscribe. Also, check us out on cultivateandkeep.com. And I did want to make another comment. If there are any books you want to hear us discuss,
yes,
you let us know.
That's a great idea.
I think this is one thing that we're going to want to do more of, discussing books that we read, because there is great wealth of knowledge in books.
Yeah, and if you want to make a suggestion, you can email us at cultivateandkeep.com, or you can find us on social media, preferably Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, one of those. You can find us on there via the website or via the social media channels, personal profiles, whatever it is that you want to find us.
Yeah, go follow my personal. I need more likes and follows and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so. What are you at right now?
I have no idea. I honestly don't care at all.
Yeah, I have no idea either.
I should have cared more.
I think I probably have like 10,000 Facebook friends.
Wow.
I don't know if that really matters, though. I think I follow about 5 of them. You can unfollow people.
Yeah, Corey's big on not... he, enjoys unfollowing people.
Dude, I love it.
Do you follow me?
Yeah, of course I do.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you follow Monique?
Yes, of course I do. What are you talking about?
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyways.
All right.
Well, thanks.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.